Over the last couple of episodes, I have teased you guys about the session that I had with Kairos Real Estate. And Kairos Real Estate is a real estate firm in Abuja, which is part of the real estate and investment arm of Dibanji's portfolio. So they brought me in. Well, actually, it was Etiquette with Etty, one of my partners, if I can put it that way. One of my partners, people that I hang around my new ecosystem here in Abuja. So it was actually Etiquette with Etty that got me in to speak with the sales team. And so we spoke to the sales associates of Kairos Real Estate and then also the people who handle their telesales. And the point of the whole session, it was supposed to be 30 minutes, but it ended up lasting over 2 hours. And that's because everybody was really interested and they got engaged. And we had a really wonderful time talking about all things sales related. So the whole thing was built around how to close the deal in real estate. Now, I think the material that we discussed there is still going to be relevant and healthy for us to discuss over here because for those of you who are long-time listeners, you'll know that I preach an interdisciplinary approach when it comes to building your business because there are things that people discuss in other industries that may be peculiar to them. But if you give it a hard think, you'll find that there's a corollary and it applies to our own industry as well, which in this case is for those people in the wedding and the event space. Now, even if that were not the case, most sales trainers or sales consultants will tell you that the principles of selling and marketing are the same. The question is just how you adapt it to one particular industry or context over another. So, even though it is material that was delivered to a real estate audience, it still applies to those of us in the wedding and the event space. And if you do some studying on your own, you'll find out that most of the sales gurus that we follow or that we look to, like Grant Cardone or Tom Hopkins, typically came from the real estate space anyway, or what's his name? Brian Tracy, who was from the, I think it's more of a commercial or insurance background, I can't remember. But whoever it is that you find out there, you'll find that they didn't take their starting point from the wedding or the event space. So it's just about learning these principles which are universal and then adapting them to our own situation. So I guess that answers the question about why are we bothering about how to close the deal in real estate? Because if we learn how to close deals, period, if we learn how to close deals, period, we'll find principles that apply to those of us who are wedding industry folks. So the first question, basically, if you're an old listener to the podcast, you will know that I don't typically start off by giving a hard yes or a hard no answer to any question because I think that we have to qualify it before going into it, because usually you'll find that questions usually have some assumptions in them that we have to tackle so that we can get a holistic answer at the end of the day. So how to close the deals in real estate? In my own opinion, I think it carries that assumption that closing the deal in real estate is different from closing a deal in any other field. And so people in the class agreed with me that is something that we ought to tackle. And so we dove headlong into the question, is closing the deal in real estate different from closing the deal in any other field? And of course, we got two responses. The responses coalesced basically around two main ideas, I'm sure you would expect, where some folks said there is no difference, it's essentially the same, and there's some people who said that there is a difference, and the example that they gave was buying a dress is different from buying a house. Now, if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast, you'll know that, in my own opinion, when it comes to sales, there is no right or wrong answer. You just have the most appropriate answer and maybe the least appropriate answer depending on the context. Now, this is one of those cases where it's a kind of yes and a no answer. So yes, if you're going to look at it from the angle that the principles of closing are the same, then you can say that there's no difference between buying a house, engaging a wedding photographer, engaging a wedding planner, or buying a dress. If you're going to look at it from a really high level angle of saying that the principles are universal, and in that sense, you'd be correct. However, If you recognize also that there are some hard differences in the context here, the difference between a wedding, a house, and a dress, you will see that even though these principles are universal, the manner in which they're going to be applied will change. And so, in that case, yes, there are differences when it comes to buying a dress, when it comes to engaging a wedding planner, or when it comes to buying a house. So, the difference, what are these differences? Now, the difference is going to depend, how will I put it? Okay, so why is this different? It's different because we're actually dealing with different contexts. Now, the old school way of looking at this, especially if you're exposed to sales writers from 60s all the way through to maybe the 80s. So the old school way of looking at it, relatively old school, because between the 80s and the 2000s is just 20 years or maybe 30 years. Anyway, so the relatively old school way of looking at it is you have simple sales contexts or complex sales contexts or scenarios. So that is the key difference. So the whole idea is that when you are dealing with a simple sales scenario, there's a way that you're supposed to run the sales conversation or run the sales process or which kind of frameworks you utilize. And then if you have a complex sales scenario, there's another way of running the conversation or running your processes. And so that's basically the first thing that we tackled. Now, if you remember, I said this was supposed to be a 30-minute session, but we ended up spending 2 hours. And so if we want to delve into as much as possible in one go, these podcast episodes are going to become extremely lengthy and unwieldy. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take it just one step at a time, only one small idea at a time, and then we stagger these things out so that I don't bog you guys down with having 20 or 30 minutes recordings in each episode. So this is where we are going to wrap it up for today. Is there a difference when it comes to closing the deal between weddings, real estate, or buying a dress or a watch or maybe a goosey? In a sense, the principles are universal, so there's no difference. But however, since we're dealing with different contexts, we are going to have to apply the rules differently or apply the frameworks differently. And so, the key thing we should be looking out for when it comes to closing the deal, whether we're talking about real estate or weddings or buying a dress, or if you sell wristwatches, let's say one of you who's listening owns that Swatch shop at Sedi Plaza in Abuja. So the key thing to be looking out for is to try and figure out, am I in a simple sales context or am I in a complex sales context? So context or scenario, I'm going to use that word interchangeably. So that's what we should be keeping out an eye for. What kind of scenario are we involved in? A simple scenario or a complex scenario? And that's going to be the question that we'll answer at the next recording. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional Tavishima Ayede. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.